Hello and welcome everyone to the Solo Multimedia Podcast, where I give you my unfiltered takes straight off the cuff. And today I'm going to be talking about a new film called Everything Everywhere All at Once. It's a new A24 film directed by two people with the first name Daniel. Their previous film was Swiss Army Man. So if you've heard of that film, also known as the farting zombie Daniel Radcliffe film, then this is the next film from those guys. And chances are you've made it here because of two reasons. One, you've just watched the film and you want to see some kind of other people's thoughts, I guess. Or secondly, you've heard about this film all over the internet and you want to just understand it a bit better or understand why people are raving about it. And the first thing I'm going to say is this film absolutely deserves the hype it's been getting. I saw it last night in a cinema of people that were just absolutely loving it. And essentially, the plot of this film is kind of a lot. So, it follows the story of a family, an immigrant, or I assume immigrant, Asian American family in the US who just run a kind of failing laundromat business, and essentially it revolves around their trip to sort their taxes, I guess you could say. But obviously the film's about a lot more than that. The plot of the film is this insane multiverse kind of existential threat thing. But none of the plot beats describe what the film's actually about. And in terms of themes and all that, or what the film's actually about, it goes for so much because this film is doing so much over the course of its 2-hour runtime. The pace is non-stop from more or less the start. Initially, they do a great job of capturing kind of the chaos of this family's life and the chaos of running a failing business and all the stress mainly placed on the mother. That's the person we follow the majority of the time. She's called Evelyn. And her journey, as the film progresses, her journey through the multiverse, in a sense, meeting these kind of other versions of not only her other family members, but of other people that she's just had sort of passing relations with, like the lady who's doing their taxes and that kind of thing. And this is just one of those films where I feel like almost anyone who watches this is going to get something out of it, because it does so many different things from a stylistic perspective, from a theme perspective, from a literal plot perspective. It's got moments where it's incredibly playful and silly and goofy, but it still manages to have a ton of heart and sincerity at the core of it. I at the end of the film came away feeling ultra warm and fuzzy inside, because the core of the film, the real heart of the story, is about the mother's relationship with her daughter. Her daughter, is kind of obviously younger, of a different generation, kind of has different perspective on things, and her mother doesn't quite understand a lot of it. And also when she's interacting with her dad, the granddad of the family, there's a big generational gaps. There's a tension there between the granddaughter and the grandfather, but the mother's kind of stuck in the middle of that. So that's an element of the film that's kind of the heart of the film, that family drama. But at the same time as that, the husband wants a divorce with Evelyn, but nothing I'm describing is going to sound that interesting in and of itself, because the way the film presents all of this is where it all comes together, I guess, because they go absolutely buck wild with the multiverse side of this film, and not in a way where you have to really intellectualize every tiny thing about how the timelines line up or anything like that. They just go for some wacky concepts and bring so much heart to them. I think basically everybody who watches this film is going to come away thinking that one of the best scenes is is people that have seen it will know what I'm on about. I don't want to spoil this though. One of the best scenes is the rock scene, unequivocally. It's such a good gag. It's such a great, funny, left field artistic choice, but at the same time it's so sincere and earnest that you can't help but feel something while watching it. At least that was my experience, and the experience of everyone I went to the film to watch this with, right? Beyond that, though, just the technical aspects of this film are all incredible. The performances are absolutely stellar. Evelyn does a fantastic job with Michelle Yeoh does a fantastic job with her range. She plays Evelyn, and she really has to kind of delve into really big different parts of this character, often switching emotions like on a dime, and she just nails it throughout the whole film. She's fantastic. But that's not to discredit anyone else in the film. There wasn't really a weak performance to speak of. Everyone did like a really, really stellar job. The set design, the cinematography, the way things were filmed and shot is all just so like fun and playful. There's a fight scene right near the start of the film that's very reminiscent of kind of early Jackie Chan films, with lots of like with like an interesting prop that one of the actors fights with. The way it's shot is incredibly dynamic and adds like such a playful sense to everything that's happening. The kind of banter between characters is one of the things I'll say about this film actually is like, it really caught me off guard with how funny it was and yet how earnest it was at the same time. And I think the fact that it uses a multiverse kind of really plays into that, because you have characters that are doing unbelievably silly things, but the film makes you believe it and then takes it to a place that's incredibly earnest and heartfelt. And it does this a lot during the film. And it really never feels like this scene is the silly scene and this scene is the earnest scene. Everything is just blended together so seamlessly to deliver kind of so many core themes and core messages and core points, I guess. Like at the end of the film, it very much there's like a real message of kind of like kindness and human connection that is delivered during a just brilliant climax towards the end. You kind of get this montage of, I guess you'll know what I mean when if you haven't seen it, you'll know what I mean when you watch it. There's like a almost kill 'em with kindness fight scene right near the end, and it's just delivered so fantastically, and it's such a beautiful and hilarious and just incredibly like visually creative fight scene. It's one of the best examples of action to deliver a message and not just action for action's sake that I can think of. It drives the plot, it drives the character motivations, it shows the growth of the character in a lot of ways. Like, there's just so much to that one scene, and so many of the scenes in this film are dense with things like this. It's such a clever film in how it ties everything together. It's just a one. Or not, it's kind of, I wouldn't say it's necessarily like an ultra unique film, because every element you will have seen kind of will feel somewhat familiar, right? You'll have seen it in other films, but it's the way that everything comes together that almost makes it unique in a way, and how well everything is executed is just, the icing on the cake, really. I think in a lot of ways, this film definitely could have gone a bit too silly or a bit too quirky in certain places, or had certain things that were like cheesy or something like that. There could have been a lot of elements that felt shoehorned in or forced, but none of it feels like that. It all feels incredibly sincere and just, it's all just delivered in such a way that I don't know how you could not enjoy it, at least to some degree. I mean, I have read some negative reviews of this, and I find them a bit bizarre, but like my experience is that everyone I went with like a really mixed crowd. Like, I took two people that I would consider to be like, one person who's like very kind of like very into film and the art of film and really thinks about all the movies he sees, deep dives into the themes and all of that, really tries to think about films, and he'll often come out with surprising takes, and he absolutely loved it. I've got another friend who's like a big film buff, maybe not as into like the arty side of things, but still like big on movie in general and the art of cinema. He really enjoyed it. Took one person who's just like not that big on film at all. She just kind of enjoys films. Thought it was amazing. And then another friend who watches a bunch of films but isn't so much into the artier stuff, prefers kind of more of the blockbuster type stuff. And he had the most negative opinion, but his was still that it was like a good very good film, just different to what he was expecting and wasn't quite as good as what he was like imagining, I guess, but still enjoyed it. So like I just can't see that many people really not enjoying this film, and at the very least you'll feel some way about it, because it's, even if you dislike it, it's so bombastic and over the top, you'll probably end up really bouncing off it and finding it just way too quirky. But like I said, I really struggle to imagine that many people like that. But yeah, I'd recommend this film to everyone. I think it's got a ton of heart. It's really wacky in places, but it never feels over the top in that sense. It still feels all very earnest, and I don't think I've seen a film get this many like genuine hearty laughs out of like an entire cinema of people in a long time. Some of the shots are just like such good punchlines. You know what? That's actually an interesting thing that I haven't seen many people talk about. This is a comedy that has a ton of visual gags, and you just don't see that much. Like, I wouldn't describe this film as a comedy film. It's kind of a, doing a lot of different things, tying in with the Everything Everywhere All at Once title, I guess. Like, it's got a ton of different tones throughout the film, but the comedy elements are not just like punchlines and set up kind of like jokes, stuff like that. There's a ton of visual gags and, funny reincorporation, all that kind of stuff. Funny even like cuts, and that type of like Edgar Wright almost school of filmmaking. So like it just gets really creative with every element of the film. But the comedy I haven't actually seen that many people speak about in terms of the visual comedy side of it, and it's a really strong element for sure. So yeah, I mean, I think that's pretty much everything I have to say about this film. I absolutely fucking loved it. I can't wait to see it again. I'm going to take my family to see it, kicking and screaming probably, but we'll see. I can't imagine too many people disliking this film. It's just such a romp, but at the same time, it does feel like quite a profound movie. It does feel like it has a lot to say about the human experience, and it should be a quite relatable film for a lot of different people as well. And I think different things will pop out to different people just because there is so much going on. Like whether whether you're kind of like struggling with like depression, that kind of thing, whether you're in a kind of rocky relationship going through some kind of like turmoil, whether like myself, I struggle to sometimes speak to my grandparents because I'm Turkish, and they speak like very fluent Turkish, but not so much great English. And there's a scene in this film that's kind of like that, where the granddaughter can't speak to the granddad as well, because her Chinese is getting weaker as she's getting more and more into American culture and that kind of thing. And that was just incredibly relatable for me specifically. So yeah, there's just a ton going on in this film, and it's difficult not to have at least a couple things that you'll be able to like either relate to or find funny or whatever. You should connect to this film in some way. At least most people will. So yeah, it deserves all the credit it's getting. It's a absolutely phenomenal film. The only real criticism I can think of is I honestly think there's a chance this will be alleviated on a second watch, but I do feel like maybe before the halfway point roughly, there's a point where the film looks like it's going to veer off into just kind of like a wacky action comedy type film. And around that point, I was like, okay, the action is like, it's really well done. I was having a blast watching it. Like, it wasn't bad by any stretch, but it just wasn't quite as good as the other peaks of the movie. Especially like the entire final half is just does not stop. And it's so pitch perfect and constant that I was from like the halfway point onwards, it was like I was completely entranced the entire time. So take that for what you will, but that point just before is kind of like where the film I think is at its weakest, and again it's still great for the most part, but maybe on a second watch the pacing will make more sense now I know where it's going. So yeah, that's pretty much my only criticism, really. It's like I would say a really minor one, because again, it was still enjoyable to watch. Just I was kind of like in the back of my head, like, okay, where is this going? Is this really going to be as good as people say, kind of thing? But now I know where it's going. Like I said, I think I may enjoy it more on a second watch. But yeah, that's kind of all my thoughts. Cheers for listening. I hope you've enjoyed this, and yeah, peace out. Go watch this film. It's fucking awesome.